All right, we are moving into the second day of factoring with finding more factors of a polynomial. Your main rule is still don't get frustrated. Remember, we're undoing the multiplication process and we're dividing this into its factors. So we would be starting with a polynomial and ending with the polynomial in factored form. This is day 2. Remember that if something cannot get factored, like only one in itself, it is called prime. It's now time to go back and try our 7 steps or 6 steps, whatever. Yeah, 6. I usually just do 6 steps, but you can look at that as 7. All right, so on the first one, remember, step 1 is to find your GCF. What goes into all 3 of these terms? A 3, I do believe, goes into all of them. And they all have an x. So I need to take out a 3 and an x. Divide by 3, you get 1. Take away an x, you get x squared. Divide by 3, you get 2. Take away an x, you get 2x. Divide by 3, I do believe you get 31. 35, I think, actually. And take away an x, and the x is gone. Because I don't want to have to redo these notes, I'm going to verify on my calculator that 105 divided by 3 is truly good, 35. I'll have my calculator there nice and handy. Step 2, we identify A, B, and C. A is 1, B is 2, C is negative 35. Step 3, I'm going to make my chart so I can find my magic factors. AC goes here and B goes here. AC is 1 times negative 35, which is negative 35, and B is 2. I do know my magic numbers, but I'll work out this process for those of you who might struggle a little more than others. Negative 35 divided by 1 is negative 35, and there's no shame in that because you need to realize that there's a method that will work. You just have to fight for it. So when you add, you get negative 34, which is not correct. Negative 35 does not divide by 2 evenly. Negative 35 does not divide by 3 evenly. Negative 34 does not divide by 3 evenly. But negative 35 does divide by 5 evenly. So I'm going to cross these out because those were decimals, and you get negative 7. When you add those two, when I say those two, I mean those factors right there, you get negative 2. I taught you yesterday that if you get the right number but the wrong sign, because we want a positive, you change all your signs, and that'll do it. Now I'm ready for my box. My box will be comprised of 1x squared, negative 35, sorry, I meant for that to be a highlighter, negative 5x, and positive 7x. I need a GCF here and here. These both divide by 1, and they both have a single x. These both divide by 7, and the 7 up here was positive. These both divide by 1, and they each have an x. These both divide by, what do those divide by? 5, and because the 5 was negative on the left, this 5 is negative. My final answer will be all of the factors. That was messy. So the 3x from the GCF, the x plus 7 from the box, and the x take away 5 from the box. Notice how this time I neglected to write my 1's because we know that they aren't needed. So the original polynomial, that original black polynomial that I typed in factored form, is right here. Number 2. I did not teach this to you yesterday because I didn't think we were quite ready for it, but I think we are now. I need you to acknowledge that the GCF is, I'm going to guess it's 2, because I know 2 goes into 6, and I know 3 could be it, so let's just check. 70 divided by 3 and 70 divided by 6 don't work, so it's got to be 2. However, when the first term is negative, you must divide by a negative. That has to be part of your GCF. They don't all have an x, so all I'm doing is dividing by -2. This makes positive 3x squared. This makes positive 16x. And this makes negative 35. To check that, see how I'm dividing each and every term by -2 to prove how I got those new numbers. Now it's time for me to move on to step 2, which is identifying a, b, and c. A is the number in front of the squared, b is the linear coefficient, and c is the constant at the end. Now I move on to step 3, where I make my chart. I have to multiply a and c and label b. B is 16. A times c is going to be a large number. We're going to have to fight for this one a little bit. So -105. I'm just going to go through the number list. I'll trust the process. -105 divided by 1 is -105. Add them, you get -104. That is not my answer. -105 divided by 2 is a decimal. -105 divided by 3 is -35. If I add those, I get -32. So not quite my answer. Remember, I need 16. If I do -105 divided by 4, I get a decimal. -105 divided by 5 is -21. Oh, I think we got it. If I add those together, I get -16. Remember how we discussed if you get the right number but the wrong sign, you switch the signs in that row. So my magic factors are 5 and 21. I do want to tell you, I think the hardest part for students is finding those magic numbers there. My top left of my box comes from right here, 3x squared. My bottom right of my box comes from here, -35. My catty corner boxes come from my magic factors of -5 and 21. Those each need an x. Now it's time to look at the box and take the GCF here and here. The GCF of the first line is a 1 and an x because only 1 goes into those numbers and they each have an x. The second GCF of the line is 7. They don't both have an x, and the 7 is positive from the 21. My GCF here and here. The top one is a 3, and they both have an x. And the bottom one is a 5, and they do not both have an x. Since the 5 on the left was negative, this 5 is negative. It's now time to state my final answer. So the factors are the GCF of -2, the 1x plus 7, and the 3x take away 5. Please never forget your GCF in your final answer. And also remember the keystones will not include the coefficient of 1. Number 3. I need to find my GCF. That's my first step. Well, they don't both divide by 4, and they don't both divide by 2 or by 5, but they both have a y squared. So that's going to be my GCF. When I take the y squared out here, I'm just left with 4x squared. When I take the GCF of y squared out here, I'm just left with the 25. It's time for me to find a, b, and c. A is the number in front of x squared, b is the number in front of x, and c is the constant without an x. In this case, we had to remember that b was 0. It's now time for step 3, making my chart. AC goes here and b goes here. A times c is 4 times -25 or -100, and b is 0. I know the answer, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and I'll just tell you it's one of those. So it's -100 divided by 5, -20. Add these, and I get -15. That is not my answer. Now we will do negative 100 divided by 6, negative 100 divided by 7, negative 100 divided by 8, and negative 100 divided by 9. I didn't write any of those answers because they were all decimals, which is what it's not allowed on this type of problem. Negative 100 divided by 10. There's your magic negative 10. Why is that one your magic factor? Because if you add them, you would get the 0 that you wanted. It's now time for the box. In the top left of the box, we put the 4x squared. So you'll always look after your GCF. In the bottom right of the box, we put your last term of negative 25. The catty corner boxes are dedicated to your magic factors of negative 10 and 10. You always use half of the variable that you used in the top left box, so x and x. So half of that is an x. What goes into 4 and 10? 2, and they each have an x. What goes into 10 and 25? 5, and they do not both have x. The top was negative, so the bottom was negative. What goes into 4 and 10? A 2, and they both also have an x. What goes into 10 and 25? A 5, and the 10 was positive. Final answer is the factors y squared, the factor 2x minus 5, and the factor 2x plus 5. Please don't forget your GCF is part of your factored form. Number 4. I'm looking at 4, and I know the only number I could try to divide by is 4 or 2. Unfortunately, I can't divide by 4 because of the 49, and I can't divide by the 2 because of the 49. However, they all do have an h. So my GCF is an h. When I take an h away, this becomes 4h to the second power instead of to the third. When I take this h away, I get h to the first power, because you're taking a 1 off the squared, and then this is just 49. I have a new polynomial to look at, or there it is, it's partially factored. Now I find a, b, and c. A is in front of the squared term, b is in front of the power of 1 term, and c is the constant at the end. Please don't put variables with a, b, and c. Now I go to my chart. A, C, and B. B is 28, and 4 times 49 is 196. I know the answer, so to save us time, I'll just tell you it's above 10. Now, if you didn't have me there cheering you on or giving you hints, you would have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way up. So 196 divided by 10, 196 divided by 11, decimal, 196 divided by 12, decimal, 196 divided by 13, decimal, 196 divided by 14 is another 14. If you add those together, you do not get 0, but instead you get 28. All of these were decimals, which is why I didn't do them. It's now time for the box. In the top left of the box, I put right here my GCF step, my 4h squared, my first term after the GCF. And then I put my constant of 49, the last term. Catty corner, I put the 14 and the 14 from over here. And they get half of that variable, so an h and an h. The GCF here, what goes into 4 and 14 is a 2, and they both have a single h. What goes into 14 and 49? A 7, and they don't both have an h. The 14 is positive, so we drop our positive down. What goes into 4 and 14? A 2, and they both have an h. What goes into 14 and 49? A 7. This 14 was positive, so is that one. My final answer was my GCF of h. That's my first factor. 2h plus 7 and another 2h plus 7. There is a chance that they'll just write the 2h plus 7 one time, but because we had it twice, they might square it on the keystones. I want you to see the difference between this one and the last one, because on this one, you remember how we used 10 and negative 10? Look at the signs. One was a plus and one was a minus at the end. But remember on this one, we used positive 14 and positive 14, so we had a double positive at the end. So the plus and the minus happens only when we need to get that 0 right there. 2 more. I'm going to find my GCF. I'll go back to my color scheme here. I'm tempted to say a 2. However, it could be a 4. Can't be a 4, right? I knew they were all even, so I knew it had to be a 2 at least. It can't be a 4 because of the 6, and it can't be a 4 because of the 14, and it can't be a 3 because of other things, but 2 is my magic number that I need, my GCF. Now they also each have an n, so I have to divide by 2 and take away an n. I'm going to go ahead and divide by 2 and get 14. I'm going to take away an n here, and I get n to the third. Divide by 2, take away an n, so just n2. Divide by 2, take away an n. Divide by 2, and take away an n leaves none. I need you to recognize this one as a special case. This is 4 terms. 4 terms must go into the box straight away. You do not do the magic factor step. So 14n3 and negative 3, beginning and end. And then the 6n squared and the negative 7n can go either one of those spots. What goes into 14 and 7? A 7 and they both have an n. What goes into 6 and 3? A 3. They do not both have an n. The 6 was positive. What goes into 14 and 6? A 2. Not only do they both have an n, but I can actually pull an n squared out because that was my smallest. What goes into 7 and 3? A 1. They don't both have an n, and the 7 was negative, so I have to pull over a negative. My final factored form is my GCF, my 7n plus 3, and my 2n squared take away 1. However, if you remember from the last video, it is important that we check this. This times this makes 14n3. This times this makes minus 7n. This times this makes 6n squared. And this times this makes negative 3. Since that does in fact match right here, I can say that I am right and that this is the final factored form. If it ever doesn't match, then you would just write that it's prime after taking out your GCF. Number 6. 3 goes into every single term as a GCF. However, earlier in the lesson, I told you that if the first coefficient was negative, then you have to divide everything not just by 3, but by negative 3. They don't all have an x, so I just take out a negative 3. Divide here, you get 1 with an x squared. Divide here, you get positive 8 with an x. Divide here, you get positive 15. Now it's time. This is not 4 terms. A is 1, B is 8, and C is 15. She's so gross. Now it's time for my chart. That's the cat. AC is 1 times 15, and B is 8. Lily, my whole class just heard you burp. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lily, what is 15 divided by 1? What is 1 plus 15?
16.
Does that equal 8?
No.
Okay, Lily. 15 divided by 2. Is it a whole number?
No. It
Okay.
is.
It doesn't matter. It's a decimal. We're not going to use it.
Oh.
What's 15 divided by 3?
5.
What's 3 plus 5?
That's 8.
8. And that is our magic number. Which means these are our magic factors. Now I'm going to do my box here, kid. The top left of the box is this term.
He's recording.
1x squared. The screen's recording.
Okay.
And then the bottom right box is this, so 15. Remember these magic factors you helped me find? They go here and here, and they get half of that variable, so they just get a single x instead of x with a 2. Now, you don't know what GCF means, sweetie, but it's what number divides into 1 and 3. I don't know if you know that or not. The only thing that divides into 1 and 3 is a 1, and they both have at least a single x. That's called the GCF. What number?
I don't want to be in high school. It's too hard.
You'll be fine. What number divides into 5 and 15? Well, 5 does. They don't both have an x. Since this 5 is positive up here, this 5 is positive here.
Are you adding?
No, well, I'm finding the GCF. Just, you don't have to say anything. What number goes into 1 and 5? Just a 1. And they both have an x. And you pick the lowest x to the first. What number goes into 3 and 15? A 3. The 3 is positive, so this is positive. Lily goes, I don't want to be in high school. It looks hard. I'm going to play this for them tomorrow. They'll enjoy hearing that. All right.
Is this the math game?
Yes, this is a math game. Because the more you practice it, the better you get. Just like in Mario Party, huh, sweetheart? Okay, now, the final answer is that -3 from our GCF. The 1x plus 5 that we got from the box, and the 1x plus 3. The keystones will not have the coefficients of 1. So here's your final answer. Please don't rip out your hair. Don't hold the bottom of your hair when you brush. All right. Call it a wrap.